This is Dr. Charles Parker, and you're listening to Core Brain Journal. It's a place where I connect both fresh discoveries and interesting different perspectives from advanced mind science with the realities of real people and everyday life down on Main Street. Well, welcome, folks. Here we are one more time. Dr. Charles Parker at Core Brain Journal. This is episode 59, and we have Marc Hoberman here, who is a teacher's teacher. Yes, we're really interested in educational activities. That's what Core Brain Journal is all about. How do we get the message down to people who are interested? Part of that, we have a neuroscience club initiative that we started, which is over on the side there on the podcast notes. I'm not going to spend any time on that. I just want to say, Marc, thank you so much for being on. We really appreciate it. My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. So an introduction on Marc, and then what I'll do is I'll break it up and we'll find out a little bit who he is. He is in Rockland County, New York. He's been a teacher for, count this, over 32 years. And he is the owner of Grade Success Tutoring and Staff Training for over 20 years. He's been doing this. As I said before, he's a teacher's teacher. He is the author of a memoir based on his own childhood experience. I think the title is really captivating. It really has to do with search and seizure. What does it sound like? At first, it sounds like a legal problem, but it's overcoming illness and adversity, his own personal problem, which I'll have him tell you about in just a moment. Search and seizure has a lot of meaning on a lot of levels. And he's a parent educational consultant. He actually helps parents with their kids. And his company offers specific tutoring virtually in all subjects, including speed reading and study skills, and even helping kids with their SAT scores, PSAT, that sort of thing. So Marc, with that introduction, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are on a personal level, please?
Okay, so I'm married with two children, two sons. One is out of college, and one is in the Rutgers Honors College in New Jersey. Loving that. I've always been an educator, not just as a teacher, but working in camping for many years, having a camping consulting business, teaching other teachers about classroom management, and now through the memoir, teaching people a little bit more on a personal note. So I'm always about the education.
So how was it that, dating back, for you to be on this mission, you had a clear-cut transformational experience? Please share that with our audience and tell us how you got into the book and what the book has, what your message, your mission is with the book.
All right, so I would say when I was about 16 years old, very happy in Yonkers, New York, wonderful place I was brought up in, and a lot of friends, and my parents came in and said, look, Dad is the oldest of the partners in his furniture business. He had a used furniture business in Manhattan, and they actually want to expand, but one of them has to move to Florida. So because Dad is the oldest and he wants to semi-retire after a couple of years, we're going. And I had 3 weeks notice. I was in 9th grade at the time. So there'll be in a few years, no prom with my friends. Really tough to move. I did have relatives that lived in Florida, but didn't know anybody else there. And a very stressful move. And to make it 50 times more stressful, 3 months after being in Florida, I was with my cousin Candace visiting her brother Marc in University of Florida, Gainesville. And I was in my 1997 Mustang, which I loved, a great car. And I would say 15 minutes into the trip, I kept missing the exit. And my cousin kept saying, what's going on? What's going on? And then that's the last I remember. I was in that car and about, I want to say 100 feet from the phone booth, from the toll booth. This is what was told to me. I had a grand mal seizure.
Wow.
When I was 13, I fainted in the basement of the apartment complex. They didn't know if I was sick. They didn't know if I was attacked. They didn't know anything, but nothing ever happened after that. So we never had any kind of testing for that. But I had the seizure, and I was diagnosed that day in the emergency room with epilepsy. And that was just, I don't know if I could say depressing, to not have control of yourself. I'm a person who isn't type A personality. I'm always in control. you go from always being in control to never being in control. I did not have great medical care in Florida. We moved back 2.5 years after being there, and then I met a doctor who changed my life forever, Dr. Eli Goldenson, who was associated with Columbia Presbyterian in Manhattan at the time. And it was a very, very tough 2 years. It was, not being able to control yourself. I had seizures while on the medication. I had petit mal seizures. I've had grand mal seizures.
Stop right there and tell our audience what petit mal seizures are. We got people who don't really understand seizure mentality.
Sure. So petit mal seizure manifests itself in many ways. Sometimes it's just staring, which is why it's so hard. A lot of people go undiagnosed for quite a long time. Sometimes it's just like staring and people think they're daydreaming. In my case, it was starting with that, and then as time went on, an hour, 2 hours, a tremendous state of incoherency. Talking gibberish. You would say, "How are you?" I'd say, "Yep, what time is it?" And I would not know until you told me a day after what happened. I would know. Once I get to a certain incoherency, I have no memory whatsoever. And in the book, in the prologue, it says you have no memory, the blessing and the curse. Well, it might be a blessing, but it's a curse that you didn't know what was going on. So that's petit mal. Now, grand mal is, when your body shakes and you can fall to the floor. I teach this when I teach Julius Caesar in English class. Julius Caesar had epilepsy, and back then it was called the falling sickness. So, you fall. In my case, I was actually lucky. Some people just have petit mal, some have grand mal, some have both. But I've never had a grand mal seizure unless it was preceded by a petit mal seizure. Now, why is that good news? Because my parents knew that at some point during the day, I was going to have a grand mal seizure.
Wow.
Because of the petit mal first. Mm-hmm. Also in the book, it says, I don't know how many, I know a lot of your listeners, no matter what their age, will know about The Tonight Show. But if they're really young, they won't know about The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. Yeah. And the only reason I watched that and loved it was that my medication was very toxic for me. My parents were very emotionally drained from the illness and, tried so hard to help me along. But I didn't want to burden them anymore. So my medication was too toxic for me, and I didn't know that was what the problem was. I thought it was part of the epilepsy. And whenever I took it at night at 9 o'clock, 9:30, at about 10 o'clock, I became dizzy. So I couldn't go to sleep because I couldn't make it from the living room into my room unless I crawled.
Wow.
And I didn't want my parents to see that. Luckily, they went to sleep about 11:30 or so, sometimes later, so I had to watch Johnny Carson. Then I ended up loving it, but I mean, what a way. See, when people watch The Tonight Show or Johnny Carson, they remember this, they remember that. I remember why I watched it.
Yeah.
And kind of an emotional thing, but everything does connect, which is why I say I've embraced the illness and I don't let it define me, I define it. But things in my life are defined through, things that happen because of it, and I just made it part of my life.
Wow, Mark. So now, did you have more grand mals on a regular basis, or how did your epilepsy, is it resolved? You're still suffering with it? What's going on now? Okay,
so I had seizures while on the medication. I was on Tegretol and more specifically Dilantin. It was not a good drug for me. We moved to back to the New York area, Rockland County. And when I met the doctor, he gave me a pill. And I never had a seizure on that pill. The day I met him, that was it. I'll tell you a personal story. 3 weeks ago, this is 28 years without a seizure. I had sinusitis. I was on prednisone. I was on a cough medicine with hydrocodone. I was on Bactrim for a skin infection, and the perfect storm occurred. Oh. And I became incoherent.
Yeah.
For the first time ever, I knew I was becoming incoherent. And I was able to say to my wife, this feels like a seizure. And I've been on this medication, Depakote, for 28 years, even longer. But I was taken off of it in my 20s because the doctor said, you had it as a kid, you've been controlled a long time. Let's experiment with taking you off. You have no kids yet. Yes. And if you go for 18 months without a seizure, you're probably good to go. Well, 60 months later, I had my worst seizure ever in the hallway of a school in the Bronx where I was teaching. And they had to shut the school down because nobody knew about it. And they thought I was stabbed or shot. I was on the floor bleeding. Nobody knew. Nobody knew why. And I said, you know what? I'll take the medication. So I would say 3 weeks ago, I had an episode that I had an EEG during it, and they said they didn't see seizure activity, but they thought it was a perfect storm with everything else. It may have manifested itself as a petit mal seizure. It lowered the efficacy. Therapeutic range is 50 to 100. I was at 36. I've never been below 50 before. So I guess I was unprotected. And I have to tell you, the doctor came in and said, look, it's been many years. This is a good drug, but it's antiquated. We want to put you on something called Keppra, which supposedly, I'm an educator, and it was a very easy medical decision. But on the other side, I had to make an emotional decision. When you're totally controlled on a drug for 28 years, I don't want to be in front of my class with a new drug that's not working, and all of a sudden, boom, possibly have a petit mal seizure. So, we consulted the doctor on call, who's a very good neurologist, and my own neurologist, and they said, look, I would have switched to the Keppra years ago because you've been controlled, but now that you've had this issue, Keppra is the drug for you. And in doing this and being on epilepsy Facebook groups, I was ignorant to the fact. I cannot believe how lucky I was, because I am beyond shocked at how many people of all ages are not controlled. I didn't know from not being controlled except for the 2 years in, but I'm talking to people, one person whose son had a seizure on top of the oven and the stove was on and he had third-degree burns. There are people, who are getting, surgery for it. Some work, some don't. So, that's what brought me to the book. Now, I started to write the book many years ago and put it aside because life gets you busy. But my son came down with irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, and a couple of skin issues, and became very depressed. He lost a lot of weight, and I left no stone unturned. I did research on it. We went to doctors, and my wife said, how are you handling this so well? And then the light bulb went off. I said, I'm handling this so well because I live this. And I was able to calm her down, no small task, and even my son, and make him feel better. And I said, you know what? If I can do this for them, there are other people out there. I'm a teacher. This is what I am by trade. This is what I think I was born to do. And it's not just for epilepsy. The book is for if you have diabetes, if you're bullied, if you have any stress, text anxiety. What are you going to do? The fact exists that you have X. What are you going to do with it to create Y?
Very good. So then let's talk a little bit about that. That's very interesting. I think the thing that's most challenging about it is every one of these episodes you bounced hard, but then figured a way to come back on it. You were going to come back. And it sounds like what you did was, when this last episode occurred with your son and you were investigating, you said, hey, people need to know more about these things. We really need to go ahead and enhance the communication process. Now, how do you translate all that over into kids in high school, people looking for where they're going to go in life, what they're going to choose to do? How does that medical experience translate itself into dealing with the realities of everyday life?
That's an excellent question, because as a gift, I gave my 2 enrichment classes, 9th grade. I wrote a Common Core curriculum with 41 questions for the book, and I gave them the book as gifts. Everyone got their own copy, and I worked it backwards, because it wasn't, here's Marc Hoberman, author, who dealt with an illness, certainly, and I walked in. I was someone they knew for 9 months. And then I said, here's something you don't know. And I've been teaching for 33 years, and I never experienced teaching like this, because they're short chapters. It's a quick read, but I couldn't get through a chapter. They were asking so many questions. And finally, someone got up and said, look, we're sorry we keep interrupting you, but we've never had the author in front of us before. Mm-hmm. And then some people started to open up about relatives that had some illnesses and some stressful situations they had. So, it's basically, I have this. And when I had it at the age of 16, it was, I'm 54. It was many, over 3 decades ago. And I'm going to use a word but some of your listeners may never heard. I was all about the microfiche. I had to go into the library and spend 8 hours till I found 3 articles. And I said microfiche to my class. They thought I said microfish. They had no idea what I was talking about. I said, is that a small fish? No idea. I have to tell you that I can learn more about epilepsy in 40 minutes online than I did in weeks doing that. But I went to the Epilepsy Foundation. I did so much research because, you know what? I wanted to be armed with information.
Now, take a minute. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you, Marc, but there are adolescents who are listening to this, because they're going to be interested in you as a teacher and how you could possibly transform. Tell them what microfiche is. They don't know.
Okay. They've probably seen it on like Law & Order SVU or shows like that. You go in and it's like a machine that looks like a computer, and you scroll, not like you scroll on the computer, obviously. They scroll up by hand and You have to make it bigger physically and zoom in and zoom out and go to the left and go to the right and to find all these things. And it's very painstaking. It was interesting because I like doing that kind of research. But, my main thing is, you don't let the illness define you. You define it. You can't define it unless you know about it. You can't define, test anxiety unless you know why you have test anxiety and what it really is, or diabetes even. So anything, illness otherwise, or stress that teens go through now, and bullying is huge, especially with cyberbullying and whatnot. So it's really about having a great support system, which I did have. My parents would have benefited from a book like this. There wasn't one out there that we knew about at the time. They did everything they could correct medically, although Florida was a bit rough. But emotionally, behind closed doors, I heard some problematic things in the bedroom. They had a tough time with my illness. When my son had the IBS, which is not as debilitating as my epilepsy was, you go in a room and you almost say, you know how parents are, let it be me, give the pain to me, that kind of thing. And so, I want people to realize that you need a good support system, but the support system starts with you. I lost some friends when I had the epilepsy. Some people, there was a big stigma attached. Look, I'm an educator, and I'm 54, and as of last year, April, before the book officially launched, 10 people in the world knew I had it. I had relatives read the book and almost had a heart attack and said, "Is this a joke? Is this a work of fiction?" They didn't know. I have aunts that were 90 who read the book and didn't know. There was a stigma attached. My doctor said, "You're controlled. You don't have to tell anybody if you don't want to." But I didn't tell them because it wasn't their business. I told them because I don't want people looking at me a certain way, and it's been so well received, and teachers in my school have read it, and people who I don't know have read it and emailed me and whatnot. And, better late than never, but this would have benefited people. Me, it was, if nobody bought the book, it was such a catharsis. It was phenomenal for me to write.
So then how do you take the experience that you've had, and do you use it, I guess is a better question, do you use it when you're working with somebody virtually? You and I were talking before we started speaking, and you said, "Hey, yes, I do this, of course," and people are increasingly doing virtual activities with teaching. Two things. Number one, tell us how you use that experience in your actual virtual training. And then secondly, please tell us a little bit about what you do virtually and how that actually takes place for people who might want to get a better grade on their SAT.
Sure. So SAT and ACT is very big now. Actually, the ACT is the bigger in the countrywide test. So any of those college prep we do, but we do all different subjects, but the online is live. And I tell the parents, if you come into the room, your kid's room with your eyes closed, you won't know I'm not sitting next to them. Because it's 2016, the kids love it, it's technology and whatnot. But I do a lot of educational consulting with parents now, and although I can do it on the phone, it's really like having coffee with a friend when you're doing it virtually. And, so I help them with study skills, I help them navigate how their kids can study better, how they can help them become better students and support them. That's opened up, obviously I do a lot of the tutoring and educational consulting is live in this area, but there's no reason to keep it local because of where we are with technology. So I use it, all the time with the educational consulting, with SAT, ACT, and any subject really, but anything on the Board of Education. And I consult a lot of teachers on classroom management and lesson planning. So it's opened up a whole different world now.
So do you have an actual program for larger groups, or is it really predominantly a one-to-one experience? How does that work?
Yeah, it's both. So you can do it on, I can have 30 or 40 people. I've had groups of 10 or more where they can press a button and it says John is raising his hand. So it's all, connected really well through the internet. And I can do it with bigger groups. I'm going to be starting some webinars soon. I'm on the big radio podcast tour now, trying to get the book out and the information about the tutoring out. But, we do have the ability to do more than just one person. As I said, I do want to do the live webinars, the tape webinars of that. I think the sky's the limit. I think we're in the information age, and information is what made me able to deal with my illness in a different manner.
Yeah, it's so good that you're doing this. So then what are some of the adversities you've seen that you've experienced with people that they may be apprehensive about that you've resolved doing virtual training? Could you give us an example of some of the problems and some of the solutions?
Sure. So, for example, I teach people, I tell the parents, don't tell your son, study for 2 hours. 20 minutes at a time, walk away from the study area for 5 minutes. So your brain says, hey, I'm not studying now. Come back to the study area and then review. Learning doesn't take place when you study. It takes place when you review. So after the next 5-minute break and you come back and review, you may need to do 30 minutes. But even a sponge needs to be wrung out sometimes. So you can't just, once you study for an hour, if you study 3 hours in a row, I think you've wasted 2 hours because you're not absorbing it the second set of 2 hours as much as you did the first hour. I also tell parents, they should not be, if a kid does well while listening to music, I'm not a tremendous proponent of that. But if they do well, then let them listen to the music. But, a lot of kids say, I don't know, I keep falling asleep when I study. I said, tell me when you study. Well, I'm sitting in bed. You're sitting in bed? That's when I want to sleep, I read in bed. And I'm an avid reader, but I'm on page 10, I'm snoring at page 12. So, I don't want them sitting on spikes, but not on a big cushion, things like that. So, and also the problem is I have to do a lot about note-taking skills. If you go to class and you take notes badly, then you come home and you study wholeheartedly, but you're studying notes that you wrote badly. So it's just a vicious cycle of wasted time and not doing things correctly. So, you really have to organize people differently. I boast that, we don't do contracts. We don't say pay for 20 lessons in advance. It's pay as you go. We know you're going to love us. If not, I don't want you staying. If I tell you I'm the greatest tutor in the country and your son says, boy, was that guy boring, that should be the last lesson. So, you have to, I believe
in. I totally agree with that. I totally
absolutely.
That because, the issue is let's get it done. And it's got to be done every time. It's not going to be done once in a while and not going to be done maybe. You're saying, look, I'm going to tighten this thing up and make it happen.
Correct. Exactly right.
So then what would you say would be the biggest benefit that what would be the main reason right now that that people could tie up with the book from a content point of view? I'm phrasing, I'm trying to figure out exactly how to say it, but I'm thinking, what's the main theme and the content? What's that main audience that you're shooting for with the book?
It's really mixed. It's really, I would say, 6th grade, 7th grade on up to the parents, because I've had students and then their parents read it and vice versa, the parents and the student. And this way they can be in sync. They know how to support each other. They know that, we've defined that you have this problem, this issue. Could be an illness, could be, as I said, test anxiety, could be you're being bullied, but how are we going to take this? This is a fact. How do we take this fact and turn it into other facts? And don't let it define us. I say that I am not who I am in spite of having epilepsy. I am who I am because I had epilepsy. I speak in front of 200-300 people at a time when I do camp conventions, and, especially then. Now it's in my mind because of what happened 3 weeks ago. But I would say, I know it's very low chance that I'm going to have any kind of seizure. But when you go in front of 200 or 300 people, it's kind of humbling to say, you know what, I got to be in tune and make sure I'm focusing and know that, is the switch going to turn? Am I going to have a problem? And, that's been very few and far between because thank God I have been controlled for so many years. But, you have to know your limitations. You have to know how to deal with what you have. And, it's the old saying, these are the cards I was dealt. What am I going to do with it? If I can help people, which I know they've been helped by the book, and I use it in my classroom, and I use it sometimes when I connect with a certain student and his family through the tutoring, and I know I can help them. That's a big deposit in my bank account. If I have a seizure, that's a withdrawal. But if I'm making more deposits, that's what it's all about.
You feel good about it. Absolutely. Now, what happens? You mentioned camp a couple of times. I'm sure some of our listeners are curious about how does this kind of very interesting material translate to a summer camp experience?
Okay, so I do, basically my camp consulting is I do, help camps with programming and different, and a lot of staff training. So a lot of the staff training is how to deal with, with their groups and training the counselors how to deal with their groups. And that, let me tell you guys something. A lot of the kids you have in your groups are going to be kids with ADD, for example. And the time that doctors take the kids off the ADD medication is over the summer. The growth spurts, I say, welcome to camping. So, I teach them how to deal with, have patience for and how to ask the right questions, how to give directions one at a time and not give the kids overload, how to get down on their level on one knee, not above them, and different strategies and a lot of icebreakers and role playing and such. But as far as the book, it's just turning people into how important it is to be support staff for somebody, to be a supporter of a friend, a relative, a camper's parent who's worried, hey, my kid, because at sleepaway camp I train out also. And so it does all tie in. And you were asked earlier about the audience. I think this audience is for anybody who can read at this level. It's not, written like Shakespeare. It's certainly understandable. There's some humor in it. There is some sadness in it. I think everybody can connect with it. And I, as an English teacher, I'll tell you, I think there's a place for a short read. Probably takes about 2 hours to read. And, this is the plane takes off on your way to Florida. It lands, you finish the book. So I think it really helps people realize I'm not alone. And I've just learned how not alone I am more after reading the book and joining Facebook groups and talking to people. It's still a growth process even for me.
So it really isn't just about, we started the conversation with seizure discussion, but really
Right.
This is a book about how a person deals with adversity on any level and how that group process helps. What is education if it's not both an individual process and a group process? Because in that group, there's going to be all kinds of things going on. Competition, feeling misunderstood. Group dynamics are completely different than just one-to-one. There's no question about it. There's definitely a maturational experience if you handle the group, because the pressures there are, method to the madness. It really gets difficult when the group is going one way and you may wish to go another.
Absolutely. It's so true. Even, in the Common Core, I do a lot of groupings of 4, 8, and, I let them do the questions first privately, then together, and the different answers. It's so rewarding as an author when you're there live with them, and they're answering questions that the answer is not just right, but some of it's deeper than I even meant it. And I take a step back and say, that is true. Because how many times do you read something that says what Shakespeare meant when he said, well, I haven't met anybody who knows what Shakespeare really meant, because they'd have to be 480 years old or something. So I know what I meant, but they were so, they were making so many text to self connections. And you're right, they were competing for getting the right answer, but I don't know if there is a right answer, but just the discussion and learning from each other was such a pleasant experience for me. And remember, you said it's not just for people with seizures. I finished writing this when my son had his issues, and they had nothing to do with epilepsy. Yeah. And my sons read this. They knew I had it. They had no idea about petite mal, grand mal. They've never seen one. And let me tell you something. I've had over 20 seizures. I've never seen one.
Yeah, right. You've lived the moment in a different way.
Correct. Yes, people with me have seen them, but I haven't.
So in closing, thank you so much for a very interesting conversation. Take a moment to tell us how we can connect with you. We'll have it on show notes, but if you tell us a little bit about that and what's the best way to make something happen if we want to talk further to you.
Sure. So my website is www.gradesuccess.com. And, they can email me directly at info@gradesuccess.com. The book is available on Amazon, on Kindle. If they, have other devices, I can send them ebooks. Happy to talk to people. There is an author site, marchoberman.com, but they can find that on the tutoring site as well. The website's the best way, because then all the contact info is right there.
Now, when you say the author site, so that's really more about you on a personal level. The other one is for training, learning, consultation regarding educational development.
Absolutely. The other author site has this book, as well as the Ninth Period, a guidebook I wrote for secondary school teachers. But gradesuccess.com will send them everywhere, and happy to answer any questions that I can from
Marc,
there.
we're going to have them both up there for everybody to see. I want to take a moment to thank you so much, because really what you've done is you have so much great energy. I mean, you're out there kicking it around. You're making it happen. And
Thank
you're
you so
stepping up
much.
to the plate. I think that's really, really very cool. And we appreciate you sharing the time with us.
Well, thank you for giving me the time. It was my pleasure.
Thank you, Marc. You have a great day, buddy. Thanks for listening to Core Brain Journal. We're working every day behind the scenes to bring you reports that connect research benches with those street trenches. Here we share the complexity of mind science because, as you know, details really do matter. One of the most pervasive, misunderstood challenges is how commonplace medications, like those written for ADHD, are used so regularly without clear guidelines. If you think you'd like more specifics, take a minute to download my 2-page PDF packed with video links and references on the absolute essentials of how to start ADHD medications. They're easily available at corebrainjournal.com/start. Thanks for listening. Do connect and stay tuned. Together we can make a difference.